I want to take a quick second to say thank you to all of my patrons. It means so much to me that you're able to help out my channel. I'm always blown away by people willingly giving me money to help support my passion. Thank you very much. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up listening to The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing the book, which was just right now. This is book 1 of the Warlord Chronicles, and I really like this book. I'm going to give this a solid 4 out of 5 stars. I thought there were some problems with it, especially towards the end, but this was a great read. I have so many positive takeaways from reading this book. If you're not familiar with what this book is a historical fiction book about a retelling of the legend of King Arthur. And, you know, I think most people have been inundated through life with King Arthur and, you know, different animated things, different books, different movies that have gone on this myth. And this is the best there is. It does such a beautiful way of telling this story that's different than all the other ones that I've ever read, in a much better way. It's really magical what Bernard Cornwell was able to do here. And I'm a little bit new to Bernard Cornwell. I remember probably about 4 years now, I read my first book from him, and that was Agincourt, and that was another historical fiction book. I'm pretty sure that's all he writes. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's everything that he's famous for that I've seen. And yeah, this is, you know, if you're not familiar with the history of King Arthur, I find it interesting to do a historical fiction over this, because most historical fictions, especially the ones that I have read, are telling about a real life event. And they're able to put you in the point of view of somebody in that event, typically not somebody in the forefront of things, and through their eyes. Now, the legend of King Arthur is not necessarily a real thing. You know, people are not sure if King Arthur was even a person, or the other characters that are wrapped up in that mythology. You know, people like Merlin are almost certainly not real, and are combinations of many people that had a mysterious air to them and turned them into the Merlin that we know today. And so it's really fun to see, you know, what Cornwell was able to put together here with something that is essentially, you know, a myth. And yeah, so this is told in a framing narrative. And if you're not familiar with that terminology, think King Killer, where you have a character in the present telling a story to somebody else. And it goes back in time and sometimes goes back to the present, but it's all a telling from somebody. And I don't know that I've ever read one of these framing narratives where I've thought, you know, that didn't help the book. Something about that concept of a book just really appeals to me as a reader. And again, it worked so well here. You know, this book is very heavy on the descriptions. You know, not a lot of this book was dialogue. And I felt like that's normally something that I would put against a book, because I'm a big dialogue reader. Now, I say that because, and I end up saying that about a lot of things. You know, I'm a big world building guy. I'm a big characters guy. But, you know, the dialogue here was very minimal. I felt like a lot of what was happening here was really setting the stage for the rest of this trilogy. And a trilogy that I've heard basically unanimously from everybody that I've talked to about this. There's a big discussion going on right now in my Discord channel, and if you want to take part in that or talk about any of the other books that I'm reading or you're reading, come on, check out the link below. We'd love to have you. But a big discussion where most of the people that have read this have said, yeah, the first book is good, the second and third books are wonderful, especially the second book. So I'm really looking forward to reading that one. But you could tell that so much of the pieces are getting into place here. And mainly it's to introduce the actors of this story. And oh man, what an amazing cast this is. The characters are so brilliantly written. You know, you've got Durfel, and Durfel is the only character that I'm going to say that you have no idea who it is, because this is the completely made up character, the one who is telling the story. And essentially this is one of the main people that was in King Arthur's army at this time. and he ends up joining King Arthur very early on, and through a series of events, he gets to meet all of these other really important people to this myth. There's Arthur, obviously, and Arthur is probably the king, I was going to say the king of this story, but yeah, he very clearly is. But no, he's the hero, where everything works because of this character being in the story. He's so well written. I love how important this character is to the story. I love the way that Arthur looks at the world, the way he interacts with everybody else, this heroism to it that also has these major flaws to him that get him into a lot of trouble. Essentially, in this story, you have a child king, and a series of events have made that happen. And Arthur has turned very quickly into the story as the protector. Now, he's going to essentially run the small country that they're in. It's not all of Britain. Britain was very split up at this point in history. And wait for that future king to get old enough to take the throne, where Arthur was never actually a king in this story. And he's really just, sitting on the throne, working until he has to give it up, or wants to give it up. You can tell very clearly that he's not going to, cause a succession crisis here. That's not his end game. You have Merlin, and Merlin, we can all picture what Merlin looks like in our head, because virtually all the depictions you've ever heard of Merlin are talking about the same pointy hat, moons and stars outfit, blue, a wizard. And in this book, he takes some of those things. You're wondering constantly, is there actually magic involved here? Or is this just a lot of, somebody who believes very strongly in their convictions and their religion that is not Christianity? It's something else. And he's so flawed in this story. And he has these such mixed allegiances where Merlin's out for himself. And I love so much. He's probably my favorite character in this story. He doesn't show up in a ton of the story, but when he does, it's badass. And he really flips the whole story on its head and makes really a lot of the story about him. You've got Guinevere, who is... I won't want to ruin the difference about this character from what she is and what we know of her and what we know about her in this book, but it's very different in a really fun way. You've got Lancelot, who... we all picture Lancelot as this hero in shining armor and the best warrior and, the greatest at everything he does. And the full spin that Cornwell does on Lancelot to turn him into this giant coward who, gets this legend spun about him because he runs an amazing press machine. He's constantly telling all these amazing stories about how awesome he is. But in this story, he is the biggest wuss. And it's so funny to see this dynamic. And ultimately, what I love a lot about this is you can tell that these characters, what they're setting up is that these characters have this own story about them that is going to get written in history in a certain way that will change what people think about them from the real them over time. Think, present day us watching this video right now. And it's so fun to see even the characters recognize that in the moment, that, history is going to change, and what are people going to remember Lancelot as? And it's what we recognize him as. It's so fun. There's Galahad, who is Lancelot's brother in this, and is the actual badass, but doesn't get a lot of credit for it. It's such a fun cast. I cannot wait to continue on with this series, to keep going. Now, I love the world here. Now, you think of world building and it's hard to associate with a real place because, what was there really to create? But it's a history in Britain that I've never read about, or at least in this level of detail, because all of the history that I've ever read of Britain has been after the Saxons took over in 1066 and a unified Britain, or if not unified, under constant war, but essentially, a single Britain. But that's not the case here. You have many different little countries involved that are simultaneously fighting against each other, making alliances, all the while trying to fight against the invasion of the Saxons that constantly is going on. People trying to, make deals with the Saxons. This political intrigue here is so fun. I love seeing this different side of history that I knew existed, but I've never got to read about before. And it's just such a fun way. I love the small scale here, because I was wondering reading this, and I'm like, is Cornwell going to do this thing where he dramatizes the real life events here? And what I mean by that is battles back in when this book was taking place were events that took place between hundreds of combatants, not thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, extremely small scale battles. But that's exactly what we get here. There's these moments of the story where they're, like, oh man, the enemy's bringing 200 people, we are screwed. That's such a fun thing to read about. It gives a lot more intimacy to this story. And it's one that I've really never read a story that has such a small scale to the drama here, but has large stakes. Now, I will say that the thing that held me from giving this a 5 stars was, if you've watched my channel, I'm a big fan of endings making or breaking a story. Now, I don't think the ending broke this story, but it was very underwhelming, I'll say that. It didn't impress me. It did leave me very excited to see what's coming forward. I can tell that there's a lot of these major events that are going to happen that are going to make me very excited, but I didn't really get that here. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is, and I still very much enjoyed what I did get here out of the ending. It could have been a lot more. So I'm hoping for more in the next book. I can't wait to read it. I will say that listening to the audio here was awesome. Even though I am sponsored by Audible, and I love Audible, and if you want to help my channel out, click the link below or go to audibletrial.com/Matt and get a free trial. I get a kickback from that, and you get a free book. But my average ranking throughout the year, I will rate audiobooks lower than physical books. Now, I don't know the reason for that. I've come to think there's 2 major reasons this could be. One of them is that I just enjoy reading books more than I like listening to them. That's certainly possible. The other is that I often find myself, for whatever reason, taking the books that I am most excited about and making those physical reads. But ultimately, no matter what the reason for it is, my scores for audiobooks are generally a lot lower than I would normally feel like my average book score would be. This book is amplified by listening to the audio. I don't remember the name of the narrator here, but he rocks. He does such a good job pulling you into this story. The accent that he has, it's got this older English kind of feel to it. He does great voices for the different characters. I would highly, highly recommend you picking this up on audiobook instead of this physical version. I'm sure the physical version's great. The audiobook, I almost guarantee you, is a step above. So that is my review. I am very much looking forward to continuing this series. I am going to jump immediately into the next one, Enemy of God, and hopefully I will finish that in about a week or so and come back to let you know how that one is. So, thank you, and as always, happy reading to you. I want to give a quick shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons. Thank you so much, Dan Newt, and thank you so much, Sky.